Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Hello everybody, welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we shall be analyzing the Hindu newspaper dated 21st of June 2022 of the New Delhi edition. The topics to be discussed today have been presented on the screen. Timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. Before starting today's discussion, there is a small announcement for the students who are going to write mains this year. We at RAU'S IAS, we have launched the Quality Improvement Program and the test series for the optional subjects. At the Delhi campus, we shall be conducting the Quality Improvement Program and the test series for the 8 optional subjects, which you can see on the screen. And as far as our Bangalore campus is concerned, we shall be conducting the Quality Improvement Program and the test series for the 3 optional subjects. For more details, please log on to our website or call on the number which you can see on the screen. This particular article appears on page number 7. The article is titled as At the Center of the Job Creation. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 3 Indian Economy. See, recently the Government of India has come up with a vision to create 10 lakh jobs over the next 18 months. Such an announcement is quite important because right now what we are facing is a jobless growth. In spite of a rapid increase in the GDP size, we have not been able to create enough number of jobs. For example, if you look at our GDP size has increased from $275 billion in the year 1991 to almost around $3 trillion presently. However, in spite of such an increase in the GDP size, the employment elasticity in case of India has remained only at around 0.1 in the year 2017-18. What this basically means that for every 1% increase in the GDP size, the job creation in case of India has increased only by 0.1. See, as far as this particular article is concerned, this article believes that to a large extent, the jobless growth can be traced to the 1991 economic reforms which we adopted. As part of the 1991 economic reforms, we focus on 2 things. One, we reduce the role of the government. The government was asked to withdraw from a number of activities where we believe that the private sector has adequate expertise and capability. And this withdrawal of the government was accompanied by enhanced role of the private sector. So earlier, it was the government which was able to create a large number of jobs. But now, the reduced role of the government would mean that the ability of the government to create more jobs has obviously come down. This reduced role of the government accompanied by increased role of the private sector should have actually led to creation of more jobs by the private sector. But unfortunately, even this has also not happened. For example, if you look at a country such as India, we are rich in human resources. So ideally, the private sector should have focused more upon labor-intensive industries. But unfortunately, the private sector, rather than focusing on labor-intensive industries, it has focused more on capital-intensive industries. So that's the first problem. Second problem is, even though the private sector has been able to create some amount of jobs, the problem here is the nature of jobs. So the private sector is creating more of informal and low paying jobs which do not have social security benefits. Now for example, if you look at companies such as Ola, Uber, Swiggy, Zomato, etc., all of these companies are undoubtedly creating jobs. But the problem is the kind of jobs which they are creating, they are not formal sector jobs. They are not high paying jobs. They are rather low paying informal jobs which do not provide for any social security benefits to the workers. So overall, if you look at the jobless growth that we are facing right now, This has a huge concern because the demographic dividend that we are facing right now could turn into a kind of demographic curse. Accordingly, this particular article argues that the government should now take a lead. The government should take a lead with respect to creation of jobs, and it should act as a principal employment generator in India. So this is as far as this article is concerned. But if you look at a broader picture, repeatedly questions have been asked in the previous year mains with respect to the jobless growth. As you can see, questions have been asked in mains 2015 as well as mains 2016. So as far as the UPSC mains examination is concerned, one should be aware about various aspects, that is the present status of employment in India, what are the reasons for the jobless growth, and what should be done in order to create more of jobs. So based upon our discussion, a mains question for the practice here could be: the higher GDP growth rate in India has failed to translate into higher employment opportunities. In the light of this statement, give a reasoned account for the jobless growth of the Indian economy. So what we will do here is we will understand all the aspects related to the jobless growth of the Indian economy. And once we are done with the discussion, we will look at this particular mains question for practice and we'll discuss as to what should be the suggested answer structure and how should you write an answer to this particular question in terms of introduction, body and conclusion. So let us first try to understand the content, that is about the jobless growth. So let us first look at the present status of employment situation in India, that is the sectoral share in terms of GDP as well as employment. Now this particular chart here shows the contribution of the three sectors both to GDP as well as employment. When you look at the agriculture sector contributed almost around 16% to India's GDP in the year 2019-20, but it employed almost around 45% of India's workforce. So this clearly shows that there is high level of disguised unemployment in the Indian agriculture. When you look at the industry, the industrial sector in turn comprises of various subsectors. These include manufacturing, mining, electricity and construction. So these four subsectors together account for the industrial sector. So if you look at the contribution of the industrial sector in the year 2019-20, it was around 30% to GDP and 25% to India's employment. Particularly, if you focus on the manufacturing sector, the share of the manufacturing sector to India's GDP as well as employment, it has remained stagnant since 1991 economic reforms. The share of manufacturing sector to India's GDP, this has remained stagnant at 16%, and the share of manufacturing sector to employment, even this has remained stagnant at 12% since 1991 reforms. Lastly, if you look at the services sector contributes the highest to our GDP, that is more than 50% to the GDP. But the problem here is it contributes only around 30% to the overall employment in India. This is quite important because if you look at the services sector in turn includes the financial sector, the IT sector, BPO sector and so on. And all of these services sector basically requires highly skilled workforce. And since we are not provided adequate skill set to the workers, the service sector has not been in a position to create more of jobs. So as you can see, each sector of our economy has certain problems when it comes to the employment creation. Agriculture has high level of disguised unemployment. Industrial sector has not been able to create jobs. Services sector's contribution to GDP is higher, but its contribution to employment is lower. The second problem is also with respect to the nature of jobs that we are creating. See, like I said earlier, we are not only concerned with the number of jobs, that is the quantity of jobs that we are creating, we are also equally concerned with the quality of jobs. It being said that we are creating more of informal and low paying jobs. The third problem is with respect to informalization of workforce, which basically refers to increase in the share of contractual workers. So here, let's say you have a particular industry. Now this particular industry has two options. Either it can employ a permanent worker or it can employ a contractual worker. If this industry employs a permanent worker, this industry will not have a necessary flexibility with respect to hiring and firing the permanent worker. This industry would also be required to contribute to social security benefits such as pension insurance for such permanent workers. When it comes to the contractual workers are hired for a short span of time as per the contract. So here the industries have the necessary flexibility to hire and fire such contractual workers. The industries did not contribute for the social security benefits of such contractual workers. So as you can see, it is more profitable for the industries to hire contractual workers rather than hiring the permanent workers. But the problem here is, if more number of people are employed as contractual workers, these people are actually paid less salaries. They are paid less wages in comparison to the permanent workers. These contractual workers, they are not provided with the skill set by the industries. They do not have access to social security benefits. So in case of India, what has been happening is the share of the contractual workers in the organized manufacturing has been increasing. In 1990s, the share of contractual workers in the organized manufacturing, this was around 12%, but around 2016-17, the share of the contractual workers in the organized manufacturing has almost doubled to 25%. So we can imagine that almost one-fourth of the workers employed in the organized manufacturing are actually contractual workers. So this itself is referred to as the informalization of workers. The next problem as identified by the International Labour Organization is with respect to the working poors. The International Labour Organization has highlighted that even though people are employed in India, these people have low wages, they do not have access to social security benefits, and hence in a way they can be referred to as the working poors. And the last problem is with respect to the female labor force participation rate in India. If you look at the overall female labor force participation rate in India, in 1990s, it was almost around 45%. What this basically means that almost 45% of the women in the age group 20 to 59, they were either working or they were looking out for work. So in 1990s, almost 45% of the females in the working age group of 20 to 59, they were either working or looking for work. But now, if you look at the female labor force participation rate, this has got reduced to just 25%. On the other hand, if you look at the male labor force participation rate, it is much higher at almost around 75%. That is, the male labor force participation rate is almost thrice the female labor force participation rate. So this clearly shows that we have not been able to create enough number of jobs for the females in India. And this in turn could have a wider ramifications as far as the Indian economy is concerned. For example, if more number of females are unable to find jobs, then we will not be able to promote women empowerment. If women are not empowered, it could have an adverse impact on the maternal health, the child health, and we may not be able to promote inclusive growth and development. So what are the main reasons for the jobless growth of the Indian economy? First and foremost, if you look at countries such as China, and in more recent times, countries such as Bangladesh, Vietnam, etc., these countries have been able to create a large number of jobs by focusing on the manufacturing sector. But unfortunately, in case of India, the manufacturing sector has failed to take off. This is evident in the fact that the manufacturing sector's contribution to both GDP as well as employment has remained stagnant since 1991 economic reforms. Obviously, there are a number of reasons as to why the manufacturing sector has failed to take off. For example, first and foremost, we do not have access to the factors of production, that is land, labor, and capital. For example, the land acquisition, even today, it is considered to be quite time consuming and cumbersome. We have failed to bring about the labor reforms in India, and access to capital is also constrained. Secondly, the import of cheaper goods, particularly from countries such as China, has also adversely affected the manufacturing sector. Thirdly, the logistics sector in case of India is also in a bad shape. For example, if you look at the logistic cost in case of India, it is almost around 10 to 14% of India's GDP, and this is considered to be quite much higher in comparison to other countries where the logistic cost is hardly around 8 to 10%. So when the logistic cost is higher, obviously this will have an adverse impact on our domestic manufacturing. Second problem is with respect to lack of adequate skill sets. See, like I said earlier, the agriculture sector employs almost around 45% of India's workforce, and there is high level of disguised unemployment in the Indian agriculture sector. So if you have to reduce this disguised unemployment, we need to provide adequate skill set to these workers so that they can shift from less productive agriculture to more productive manufacturing or the services sector. But the problem is we have not been able to significantly ramp up the skilling ecosystem in India. For example, according to the economic survey, only 13% of India's workforce are skilled. And even among these 13%, 11% are informally skilled, and the extent of the formal skilled workers is just 2%. Thirdly, if you look at the MSME sector in case of India, MSME sector, just like our Indian agriculture, it is considered to be the backbone of the Indian economy. It contributes almost around 28% to India's GDP, 40% of the overall exports, and 45% of the manufacturing output. But the problem here is even the MSME sector has been unable to create more number of jobs. And this inability of the MSMEs to create jobs could be traced to the aspect of missing middle. So what exactly is this problem of missing middle? Let's understand that. So in case of the manufacturing sector in case of India, we have a large number of small size enterprises and few large size enterprises. And there is a near absence of the medium sized enterprises. So what this means is that these large number of small size enterprises, they have failed to grow either into the medium sized enterprises or into the large size enterprises. So we have a large number of small size enterprises and very few large size enterprises, and there is a near absence of medium sized enterprises. This itself is referred to as the problem of missing middle. And this problem of missing middle is basically attributed to the MSME sector. So let's understand this part. See, basically, when you start a new industry as an MSME, this industry should go on to become a giant size industry. It should not continue to remain small. So, in order to nurture these MSMEs to grow into large size enterprises, the government of India gives a large number of benefits to these MSMEs. For example, these MSMEs may be exempted from the labor laws. The MSMEs also get access to the credit through the priority sector lending target as stipulated by the Reserve Bank of India. They are also given guaranteed procurement through the public procurement policy For example, the government of India has stated that at least 25% of the goods and services procured by the central ministries, departments, and the central government agencies would have to be procured from the micro, small, and medium enterprises. So we have given a number of benefits such as exemption for labor laws, access to credit, public procurement policy. The idea here is that these small size MSMEs should be nurtured and it should grow into large size giants. So once they grow into large size giants, automatically they will be able to optimally utilize factors of production, that is land, labor, capital. It will have more productivity. They will be in a position to create more jobs, reap demographic dividend, and so on. But unfortunately, these small size MSMEs are not growing into the large size industries. Rather than growing into large size industries, these small size MSMEs, they are continuing to remain small rather than grow bigger. Such MSMEs that remain small and fail to grow into large size industries, they are referred to as the draft firms. So draft firms are basically those MSMEs which may be more than 10 years old. Since they are more than 10 years old, they should have grown into large size industries. They should have created more of jobs. But these draft firms, they employ less than 100 people. So even though they are more than 10 years old, they have not been able to create enough number of jobs, leading to low productivity and low employment creation. Now the question which obviously should have arisen in your mind is, why are these MSMEs not growing into large size firms? Why are they continuing to remain small? See here, the government, as I said, gives a number of benefits, and these benefits are applicable only to the MSMEs and not to the large size industries. For example, let's say you have started a MSME. Your MSME will have all of these benefits given by the government. But if your MSME goes on to become a large size industry, you will lose out on all of these benefits. You will not be exempted from labor laws. You will not have access to credit under the priority sector lending. You will not have the guaranteed public procurement. So if your MSME goes on to become a large size industry, you will not be able to get the benefits. So in order to avoid losing out on the benefits, the MSMEs continue to remain smaller rather than the grow bigger. That is why it is being said that the incentives to stay smaller in India is much higher than the incentives to grow bigger. Nextly, as I said earlier, the private sector has focused more on the capital intensive industries rather than the labor intensive industries. The question is why? See, government has come up with a number of policies in order to provide cheaper credit to the industries. So if you look at industries here, for the industries there are two factors of production, that is capital and labor. When it comes to capital, the government of India has been facilitating easier access to capital through various government schemes and policies. For example, the government is implementing schemes such as the credit guarantee schemes, under which the government is ensuring that the private sector has access to easier credit from the banks. So here what has happened is, between these two factors of production, that is between capital and labor, the capital as such has become more cheaper. So since capital in case of India has become more cheaper in comparison to the labor, the industries, that is the private sector, has focused more on capital intensive industries rather than the labor intensive industries. Last and most important is with respect to obsolete and archaic labor laws. See, labor as a subject, it is placed under the concurrent list, which means both center as well as states can make laws related to labor welfare. The problem is, earlier we used to have multiple labor laws. So the multiple labor laws in turn used to impose huge compliance burden on the firms, and this in turn led to the jobless growth. So in order to avoid these problems with the labor laws, we have decided to consolidate the labor laws into the 4 labor codes. But unfortunately, so far we have not notified these implementation of these labor codes. So what should be the strategies going forward in order to create more of jobs in the Indian economy? First and foremost, according to the Economic Survey 2016-17, we need to focus more upon the labor intensive industries such as the textile industry, leather industry and so on. The Economic Survey 2016-17 has also highlighted that if you invest some amount of money in iron and steel industry and the same amount of money is also invested in say textile or leather industry, so this money that we invest in textile and leather industry, this can create 240 times more number of jobs in comparison to the number of jobs that we would be able to create in the iron and steel industries. So this is the first thing. Secondly, according to the Economic Survey 2019-20, India needs to get integrated into the global value chains. So as you know, we have come up with Make in India. So going forward, Assemble in India should get integrated with Make in India. India should become part of the global value chains. And by doing that, we would be able to create 4 crore jobs by the end of 2025. Thirdly, the Economic Survey 2017-18 has also highlighted that we need to incentivize the infant MSMEs rather than the draft MSMEs. What does this mean? This basically means that when we give incentives to the MSMEs, right now these incentives are given irrespective of the age of MSME. So whether the age of MSME is 1 year or say 10 years or 15 years, all such MSMEs get the government incentives. So going forward, what we must do is, we must give incentives to only the infant MSMEs which may be say 1 to 5 years old. So beyond 5 years, the MSMEs should not be able to get any kind of incentives from the government. Nextly, as I said earlier, even though the Parliament of India has passed the 4 labor codes, so far the government has not notified these labor codes due to the opposition of the trade unions. So going forward, we need to take into confidence the trade unions and implement the labor codes as early as possible. Nextly, according to the Dalwai panel on doubling of farmers' income, we need to focus on secondary agriculture in order to create more jobs in the rural areas. So what exactly is secondary agriculture? Secondary agriculture comprises of all the enterprises which are either in the manufacturing sector or in the services sector, and such enterprises either provides various inputs to the agriculture or uses various agricultural products as raw materials. All such enterprises, we refer to them as the secondary agriculture. For example, let's say you have a manufacturing enterprise that uses the agricultural products as raw material. The best example happens to be a food processing industry. So this food processing industry is part of the secondary agriculture. Similarly, let's say you have a particular manufacturing enterprise which is providing seeds, vermicompost, fertilizers as inputs to the agriculture. So it is a secondary agriculture. Similarly, let's say you have a service sector enterprise which is providing various inputs to agriculture. For example, let's say it is providing agricultural machineries on a rental basis. Similarly, a rural enterprise which is providing extension services and information dissemination to the farmers can also be considered to be part of the secondary agriculture. So according to Dalwai panel, promotion of secondary agricultural activities can not only help us double the farmers' income, but at the same time, it will also help us create more of jobs in the rural India. And lastly, according to Baba Kalyani Committee on Special Economic Zones, that is the SEZs, the SEZ should be renamed as Economic and Employment Enclaves. So what is the rationale here? So you all must be knowing that we have basically set up the special economic zones in order to boost the exports from India. So a industry which is located in SEZ is given incentives which is directly linked to the export of goods and services. Higher the export of goods and services by a particular industry, higher would be its incentives. So here the incentives which a particular industry gets, it is solely dependent upon how much export it is doing to other countries. So here the incentives as such are not linked to the number of jobs a particular industry is creating. So irrespective whether a particular industry is creating 10 jobs or 100 jobs, if the industries are exporting same amount of goods and services to other countries, both these two industries would get equivalent amount of incentives. So here the SEZs as such have become a kind of island of exports rather than becoming catalyst of economic growth and development. Accordingly, the Baba Kalyani Committee has highlighted that the SEZ should be renamed as Economic and Employment Enclaves, and the incentives to be given to industries should not only be dependent upon the exports, but it should also be dependent upon how much jobs they are able to create. So these are some of the important aspects which one should understand as far as this particular article is concerned. Now, if you look at the question here, the question is, the higher GDP growth rate in India has failed to translate into higher employment opportunities. In the light of this statement, give a reasoned account for the jobless growth of the Indian economy. So as far as the introduction to this particular question is concerned, in the introduction, you need to substantiate the statement which is given in the question. So you need to substantiate that the high GDP growth rate has failed to translate into higher employment opportunities. You can substantiate this through some report of an international organization. You could substantiate this through data, through facts and figures. And when it comes to the body of the answer, in the body of the answer, the main focus should be on discussing the reasons for the jobless growth. But once again, when we are discussing the reason for the jobless growth, instead of just writing the points, please ensure that you are substantiating the points with certain substantial evidences. You are substantiating the points with certain facts and figures. So this will be a lot of value addition to your answer. And in your conclusion, a logical way to conclude here would be, since you have discussed the reasons for the jobless growth, in the conclusion, you could highlight one or two strategies to boost the employment creation in the Indian economy. So here I have incorporated the answer in terms of the introduction, body and the conclusion. So please have a look at this particular suggested answer and also try to write the same answer on your own. With this, let us now move to the next article. The next article appears on page number 7. The article is titled as Resurrecting a Dead Law. This article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 2, Polity and Governance, as well as GS Paper 3, Internal Security, particularly with respect to cyber crimes. This article basically seeks to focus upon two important aspects. That is, the first one is related to the present global efforts to prevent cyber crimes and cyber warfare. And the second aspect is with respect to Section 66A of the Information Technology Act in India. So let us discuss this particular article in detail, starting with the present global efforts to prevent the cyber crimes and cyber warfare. See, if you look at the cyber crimes or the cyber warfare, they are essentially transnational in nature. It basically means that a person or an entity sitting in country X can easily launch a cyber crime or a cyber warfare against another country Y. So in event of such cyber crimes or cyber warfare, there is a need for active coordination between the countries to prevent and investigate such cyber crimes and cyber warfare. Accordingly, right now we have a convention known as the Budapest Convention. This convention is also referred to as the Convention on Cyber Crimes. So it is a first legally binding international treaty which has come into being to address cyber crimes and cyber warfare and to promote coordination between the member countries. This particular convention has been formulated by the Council of Europe with active support of the developed countries such as US, Canada and Japan. Initially, this particular convention was opened up for the signature in the year 2001 and it was finally adopted in the year 2004. Right now, this particular convention has been signed and ratified by more than 60 countries across the world. In order to prevent the cyber crimes, this particular convention follows a number of approaches. For example, if any country decides to sign and ratify the Budapest Convention, such a country would be required to come up with a domestic legislation. That is, such a country would be required to formulate a domestic law which should be in line with the Budapest Convention. Secondly, it also promotes international cooperation between the member countries in order to prevent the cyber crimes. And thirdly, in order to facilitate the investigation of the cyber crimes or the cyber warfare, it provides for the trans-border flow of data from one country to another. So like I said, it is quite easier for a person or an entity sitting in country X to launch a cyber crime or a cyber warfare in country Y. So in event of such cyber crimes and cyber warfare, so accordingly this particular convention provides for the flow of data from country X to country Y. So the authorities in country Y which are investigating the cyber crimes or the cyber warfare would have easy access to the data from country X. So by accessing the data from country X, the authorities would be able to carry out the investigation and find out the real culprits. So like I said, this particular convention has been signed by more than 60 countries across the world. But when it comes to certain specific countries such as India, China and Russia, these countries have opposed the Budapest Convention. So India has neither signed nor ratified the Budapest Convention. India has raised a number of concerns with respect to the Budapest Convention, and that is why it has not signed this particular convention. So what are India's concerns? See, first and foremost, this particular convention was opened up for signature in the year 2001. Prior to this, negotiations took place between the countries. As part of this negotiation, it was basically the European Union countries and the developed countries such as US, Canada and Japan which participated in the negotiations. India as such was not a party to these negotiations. So since India was not a party to these negotiations, India's interests and concerns have not been taken into account in this particular convention. So the first concern raised by India is that it was initially not part of the negotiations, its interests and concerns are not taken into account and hence it is not willing to sign this particular convention. Secondly, India also believes that the Budapest Convention has a limited scope with respect to its application. For example, the Budapest Convention, according to India, is not applicable to the state actors. The Budapest Convention is applicable only to the non-state actors. What this essentially means that those entities which are associated with the government, that is the government agencies, if they are carrying out cyber crimes or cyber warfare, they will not be covered under the Budapest Convention. The Budapest Convention would cover only the non-state actors. Similarly, the Budapest Convention is not applicable to the non-members. Now, for example, let's say you have a country X, and from this country X, a cyber crime or cyber warfare has been launched against India. And let's say this country X is not a member of Budapest Convention. In such cases, Budapest Convention will not be applicable and India will not be able to coordinate with country X to carry out the investigation. And last and most important is that according to India, this particular convention goes against the principle of sovereignty. Question is how? See, like I said, whenever cyber crimes or cyber warfare takes place, the Budapest Convention provides for trans-border flow of data to the concerned authorities. So in case of example which I have taken earlier, here there would be a trans-border flow of data from country X to country Y so that the authorities in country Y are able to carry out the investigation. So here, India believes that such cross-border flow of data would adversely affect the principle of sovereignty of country X. Ideally, what should have happened in this particular case is the authorities in the country X should themselves carry out the investigation and provide the necessary report to country Y so that the country Y can then take suitable action. If the authorities in country Y are able to investigate the cyber crimes that are taking place in country X, then obviously it would go against the principle of sovereignty for country X. So these are some of India's concerns with respect to Budapest Convention. So here, Russia is one of the countries that has been vehemently opposing the Budapest Convention. Accordingly, in the year 2019, the Russian government came up with a new United Nations Convention on countering the use of information and communication technology for the criminal purposes. So this United Nations Convention was initially proposed by Russia and later it was taken up by the United Nations General Assembly in December 2019. So now the United Nations General Assembly has set up an ad hoc intergovernmental committee to decide and discuss on the broad provisions which should be included in the new United Nations Convention. So the new United Nations Convention, this will be in addition to the Budapest Convention. This United Nations Convention would be applicable to the United Nations member countries. So here, as I said, right now this particular convention is presently being discussed. It is being debated. But if you look at the draft provisions which Russia had submitted before the United Nations General Assembly, first and foremost, according to Russia, each and every UN member country should come up with the domestic laws to prevent the cyber crimes. So this is almost similar to the Budapest Convention. The United Nations Convention also seeks to put in new procedures for enhanced cooperation between the member countries. Further, if you look at the least developed countries and poor countries, these countries may not have the necessary expertise or capability in order to stop the cyber crimes or cyber warfare. Accordingly, the new convention seeks to set up an international body known as International Technical Commission in order to assist the member countries to prevent the cyber crimes. And last and most importantly, this particular convention upholds the principle of sovereignty. So as per this particular new convention, authorities of one country would not be allowed to operate in other country. So in a way, the new convention seeks to prevent the trans-border flow of data which would have an adverse impact on the sovereignty of a particular country. So as far as India is concerned, India has been opposed to the Budapest Convention. That is why it has not signed and ratified the Budapest Convention. But India is in favor of the new United Nations Convention that is presently being discussed and debated among the member countries. Apart from discussing the new United Nations Convention, this particular article also seeks to establish a linkage between Section 66A of the Information Technology Act and the new United Nations Convention that is proposed by Russia. Now, if you look at Section 66A of the Information Technology Act, this particular section dealt with transmission of information which is grossly offensive or of a menacing character. So under this particular provision, if a particular person sends any information through any device, and if such information is constituted to be offensive or of menacing character, then the government could punish such a person. Now, if you look at this particular section, that is section 66A, the words which are used in this particular section, that is grossly offensive or menacing, they are quite ambiguous. They are unclear. They are open to interpretation. And accordingly, the government had misused this particular provision in order to curb dissent against the government. Apart from that, the Supreme Court also stated that this particular section goes against the fundamental right of speech and expression of the Indian citizens. Accordingly, in a very famous case known as the Shreya Singhal case, the Supreme Court struck down this particular section as unconstitutional. So right now, Section 66A has been struck down as unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. Now, this particular article highlights that recently India has made a submission before the United Nations. In its submission, India has recommended as to what should be the broad contours or the broad provisions which should be incorporated in the new United Nations Convention. So the author of this particular article highlights that according to the submission made by India, India has recommended that the new United Nations Convention should have provisions which are similar to Section 66A, which means in the new United Nations Convention, if a person is transmitting any information which is grossly offensive or of menacing character, such a person should be punished. And such kind of provision should be incorporated into the domestic legislations of all the United Nations member countries. So accordingly, the author believes that such a submission made by India before the United Nations, it is actually a backdoor attempt by the government to reintroduce Section 66A. So Section 66A has been struck down by Supreme Court. Now the government has been trying to reintroduce Section 66A once again through a new United Nations Convention. So let's say if India's submission is accepted, so the new United Nations Convention would have provisions similar to the struck down Section 66A. So once this new United Nations Convention comes into being, India would be required to make a domestic law to prevent cyber crimes and cyber warfare. And such a domestic law would once again incorporate a provision which is similar to Section 66A. That is why the author believes that it is a backdoor attempt by the government to reintroduce Section 66A. But the question which should arise in your mind is it really possible to reintroduce Section 66A in India once again, particularly when it has been struck down by Supreme Court? There are a number of reasons as to why it will be difficult for the government to reintroduce Section 66A. For example, as I said, the new convention is presently being discussed and debated. The new convention has been proposed by Russia, but this new convention has been opposed by a number of Western countries such as US and European Union. So it is difficult to say as to whether the new United Nations Convention would be accepted by the member countries or not. Secondly, the Parliament of India would need to pass a law to incorporate a provision similar to Section 66A. So when the bill is going to be debated and discussed in the Indian Parliament, obviously there would be huge opposition to such a provision. So the government of India would be careful enough not to reintroduce Section 66A. That's the second thing. Thirdly, even if the government of India is successful in reintroducing a provision similar to Section 66A, it would be once again struck down by the Supreme Court of India on the grounds of its constitutionality. At the same time, there is a possibility that such a provision may be reintroduced. How is it possible? Now, this could be possible when a larger bench of the Supreme Court overrides the Shreya Singhal judgment, and if the larger bench believes that Section 66A of the IT Act is not unconstitutional, if it upholds the constitutional validity of such a provision, in such case, Section 66A may get reintroduced in India. So as far as whether it is possible to introduce a provision similar to Section 66A or not, it is open to speculation. So let us wait and watch as to what would happen once the new United Nations Convention comes into being. So as far as your UPSC prelims and mains examination is concerned, please do make a note of the Budapest Convention as well as the new United Nations Convention that is presently being discussed. With this, let us now take up the next article. The next article appears on page number 5. The article is titled as Farmers Said to Strike Gold with Flowers. This particular article highlights that earlier Kerala used to buy in bulk the marigold flowers from the neighboring state of Tamil Nadu. But this year, due to the successful interventions made by Krishi Vigyan Kendras, a large number of farmers in Kerala have started to grow the marigold flower. Hence, as far as your UPSC examination is concerned, one should be aware about various government schemes and policies to promote the cultivation of aromatic plants. In this regard, we must understand about the Mission Aroma. See, right now we have a number of aromatic plants which are known for their flavor as well as fragrance. Some of these aromatic plants include lavender, mint, lemongrass, rosemary, wild marigold, damask rose, Indian valerian, and so on. So, when you look at these aromatic plants, as I said, these plants are not only known for their fragrance, they're also known for their flavor as well. It is being said that these aromatic plants contain a large number of compounds which can be used in the field of medicine. Apart from that, the essential oils which are being extracted from these aromatic crops, these essential oils find a use in a large number of industries such as the perfume industry, the cosmetic industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the food industry, and so on. So, in order to promote the cultivation of such economically important aromatic plants, the government of India has launched the Mission Aroma in the year 2017. This particular mission is presently implemented by the Central Institute of Medicinal and Aromatic Plants, which is located at Lucknow. Please do note that this particular Central Institute is a laboratory which functions under the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. So, under Mission Aroma, the government is focusing on a number of aspects. For example, we are focusing upon the free distribution of aromatic plants to the farmers in order to encourage their cultivation. We are also focusing upon setting up of the oil distillation facilities in the rural India in order to extract the essential oils from such aromatic plants. The government is also focusing upon integration of apiculture, that is beekeeping, with the cultivation of aromatic crops. So the integration of beekeeping with the cultivation of aromatic crops will not only help us increase the yield of the aromatic crops, but it will also help the farmers to earn additional income through the extraction of honey. So when you look at the expected benefits of Mission Aroma, first and foremost, it is being said that this can lead to higher income of the farmers. According to government estimates, the income of the farmers is expected to increase at least by around rupees 30,000 to rupees 60,000 per hectare per year. It can lead to creation of additional employment opportunities in rural India. And more importantly, if you compare the cultivation of aromatic crops with that of the cereal crops, the cultivation of aromatic crops undoubtedly yields higher profits in comparison to the cultivation of the cereal crops. For example, the lavender oil, which is presently used in the perfume industry as well as cosmetic industry, this lavender oil sells for at least around rupees 10,000 per liter. So undoubtedly, the Mission Aroma has a potential to not only promote agricultural diversification, but at the same time increase the overall income levels of the farmers. Some of the important success stories associated with the Mission Aroma is the first one, that is the Purple Revolution, which has taken place in the Doda district in Jammu Kashmir. So, in the Doda district of Jammu Kashmir, a large number of farmers have shifted from the cultivation of maize to lavender. So, this increase in the area under cultivation under lavender in the Doda district of Jammu Kashmir, this is referred to as the Purple Revolution. Secondly, Himachal Pradesh has now become the largest producer of wild marigold on account of Mission Aroma. So these are the two success stories associated with the Mission Aroma. So these are some important aspects which one should know as far as this particular article is concerned. The next article appears on page number 9. Now, this particular article basically seeks to explain the meaning of term Dutch disease in the field of economy. So, let us understand the meaning of the term Dutch disease. Now, what do you think is the nature of relationship between natural resources and GDP? Now, most of us would believe that a country, if it has to become rich, if it has to promote growth and development, such a country should have adequate amount of natural resources. On the other hand, if a country does not have adequate natural resources, such a country would remain underdeveloped, poor, and so on. So, to a large extent, this relationship is true. For example, if you look at countries such as Australia, Canada, the Gulf countries such as Saudi Arabia, UAE, etc., all of these countries have optimally harnessed their natural resources in order to promote growth and development. But at the same time, we must understand that not all the countries which are rich in natural resources will be able to promote growth and development. If that was the case, then the African countries should have been the developed economies by now. So if you look at the African countries, these African countries are very well rich in natural resources. But these countries have not been able to harness the natural resources, and that is why they have not been able to promote growth and development. In the field of economy, we call this as natural resource curse theory, which means a case in which natural resource can become a curse, wherein the natural resources can perpetuate underdevelopment in a particular country. There are a number of reasons explaining the causes of the natural resource curse theory. One among them is the Dutch disease. So what exactly is this Dutch disease? Now let's say a particular country has plenty of natural resources. In this case, let's consider that a particular country has plenty of crude oil. Since it has plenty of crude oil, this particular country would start exporting crude oil to other countries. So as it keep on exporting oil to other countries, the amount of dollar inflow into such a country would increase, and because of which the domestic currency of such a country would undergo large scale appreciation. Now just imagine what would happen if the domestic currency undergoes large scale appreciation. You know for sure that whenever there is large scale appreciation of domestic currency, it would encourage the cheaper imports into a particular country, and at the same time it would discourage the exports. So in this particular case, a country would keep on exporting oil to other countries, but when its currency appreciates, it will not be able to export the commodities of other sectors. For example, it will not be able to export the agriculture commodities, the manufactured commodities. It will not be able to export services to other countries because of its poor competitiveness. Similarly, large-scale appreciation also encourages the cheaper imports from other countries. So overall, the net effect of large-scale appreciation of domestic currency would be that it will have an adverse impact on other sectors such as agriculture. It would have an adverse impact on the domestic manufacturing. It will lead to increase in unemployment and a decrease in the GDP growth rate. So as you can see here, this particular country has plenty of crude oil. In spite of that, this particular country is not being able to promote GDP growth and development. This is mainly on account of large scale appreciation of domestic currency because of huge export of oil to other countries. Now you must be wondering as to how come this problem has not affected countries such as Saudi Arabia, UAE, and so on. Now this problem of Dutch disease has not affected these Gulf countries basically because these Gulf countries have not adopted the floating exchange rate regime. Rather, they have adopted the fixed exchange rate regime. Since the exchange rate in these countries is fixed, the domestic currencies of these countries do not appreciate nor do they depreciate. So fixed exchange rate regime in such countries has enabled these countries to withstand or counter the problem of Dutch disease. Please let me know in the comment section as to, apart from adopting the fixed exchange rate regime, what other policy measures can be adopted in order to avoid the problem of Dutch disease. The next article appears on page number 5. The article is titled as Kerala to give maximum water to Tamil Nadu. This particular article highlights that the government of Kerala is set to give maximum water to Tamil Nadu from the Siruvani Dam. Now, why is this article important? Please have a look at the question asked in Prelims 2022. In this particular question, UPSC asks you to find out the correct pairs of the reservoirs and the states in which they are located. Apart from that, if you have a look at the previous year questions, questions have repeatedly asked from important dams and reservoirs. Questions have also been asked from the perspective of important rivers. So whenever you come across any current affairs topic either related to dams or the rivers, you should know basic things. For example, with respect to dams, you must understand as to in which particular state a particular dam is located, across which river the dam is constructed. Similarly, with respect to rivers, you should find out as to through which all states does a river pass, what are its important tributaries, and so on. So based upon the requirement of the UPSC prelims examination, let us look into some important aspect about the Siruvani dams. As you can see in this particular map, the Siruvani Dam is located in the state of Kerala. To be more precise, it is located in the Palakkad district of Kerala. This particular dam is constructed across the Siruvani river. This dam is basically used for supplying the drinking water to the city of Coimbatore, which is located in the state of Tamil Nadu. Siruvani river is tributary of Bhavani river, and this Bhavani river is in turn the tributary of the Kaveri river. Apart from that, in the vicinity of the Siruvani dam, the Mithikulam hill is located. The Mithikulam hill is situated on the eastern side of the dam. With this, we have come to the end of today's discussion. The answer to the question that was asked in yesterday's DNS is option C.